All right, so while he was filling his head with all the good Eagle information stuff, I was talking with Chief Executive of Benfica. Here's how that chat went. All right, we're in the office here of the Chief Executive of Benfica, Domingos Oliveira. Thanks so much for having us and for giving us a bit of a tour of the stadium. I'm always interested when you have responsibility for a brand like Benfica, how much you lean on the history and how aware you have to be of the history, and yet at the same time how you must try and create something new and different. How do you manage the tension between the past and the future?
Well, it's a very interesting topic because we have a big and beautiful history. We have more than 100 years, and in the past we lived very strong stories. We won the Champions League twice in the 60s, and there's a lot of people who still remember that, and they always talk about the big Benfica. Now, if you project Benfica only considering the past, I think you will fail the objectives for a brand like Benfica. So what we're trying to do is to keep the memories alive, and that's the reason why we develop a big museum with all our history, but at the same time to have a team of group of people who are always trying to put Benfica in, I would say, not the next century, because the next century is too far, but I say in the next 10, 20 years. And part of it is projecting Benfica at the international level. So we are today a very important club in Portugal. We want to become a very important brand outside Portugal, especially in China and the States, and to have some influence at European level.
All the more interesting that you say this in light of the stories coming out this week about the potential for a European Super League. You know, I'm sure you're aware of those conversations happening. You're probably in some of those conversations. So what's your take on it? What do you think is the future? Is a European Super League inevitable?
Well, as you probably know, I'm also a board member of the European Club Association. So I would say that I have to be a little bit careful about the comments I will make on that. The discussion we're having at the European Club Association don't talk about a Super League. Okay, I understand the interest of some clubs for a Super League, but I think that we will miss the long history at European level between for teams like ours, like Ajax that will play in 2 days from now, like Anderlecht, and this is just to mention some very important clubs at the European level that eventually would not be part of this Super League. So we don't like the idea, as Benfica, I'm just talking as Benfica, we don't like the idea. We understand the financial impact for those big clubs, but I think that at European level we will lose a lot of the basis that were the foundation of the European football.
And the foundation of the sport, which is the connection that the fans have with the club, because it represents their locality against the club down the road. That's exactly what makes football magic.
And that's the reason why, for example, when we say we want more European matches, less domestic matches, we are not saying we don't want domestic matches. Because if you ask Benfica fans who are their rivals, they will talk about Sporting or Porto. They will not talk about Barcelona or Real Madrid. And that's, again, the foundation of football. It's playing with teams in your country. Now, if those clubs were eventually preparing that, and I haven't seen any confirmation of that, but those clubs will lose their impact at domestic level, I think that they will lose the basis for their development.
And football will suffer, it seems, to anybody outside, that if you don't have the bonds that brought the teams together in the first place, if it becomes a manufactured league, then why do we go? It's just entertainment.
You know that I think that the best example of this kind of leagues is the MLS, okay, where you don't have promotion or relegation. And I will be in Miami in 2 weeks from now discussing the opportunities in terms of development of the football in the States. But I think that this basic idea of not having promotions and relegation affects their performance and the competitiveness of the American football. I don't think that European fans would like to see the same situation in Europe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One last thing I wanted to ask you about Benfica. Obviously, you've had such incredible success with buying players, scouting players, turning local players into global superstars of the game. At some point, do you hope to be able to keep on hold of those players and build a super team yourselves, or is that just the nature of the game, the way it has gone?
Well, I think that 90% of the European clubs are selling clubs, okay? So you have most probably 10, 12, 15 clubs who today can say that they don't need to sell players in order to keep their financial in a good situation. In our case, we saw a big change in the last, I would say, 10 years. Until, I would say, this season, it was mandatory for us to sell 1 or 2 players in order to balance our P&L. This season is the first season where, in fact, we sold some players, but I would say that those were not the most important players. Guys like Ruben Dias, who is a central defense, 20 years old, trained and nurtured in Benfica for the last 10 years. We got some offers from outside Portugal, and we decided to retain the players. So the kind of development that we have today in Benfica, increasing revenues and allowing to keep these players because we give them a best salary, is extremely important.
So João Felix, last night when this piece airs, you signed to a new deal. That's the type of deal that you want to see the superstar 18-year-olds kept for as long as you possibly can.
Yes, exactly. João Felix is a very good example. Recent signature, but Ruben Dias, Jadson Fernandes, etc. I think we have fantastic group of players that were developed inside Benfica for the last 10 years. Guys like Bernardo Silva left the club. We want the future Bernardo Silvas to stay in the club. We're
at Web Summit, obviously. That's the reason that we're here. It's been interesting to hear you talk about having a technology background and coming into football with that technology background, and it's been important for you, you said, to inject a technological approach to the science of the football over the last decade and a half, and you're beginning to see the benefits of that, it seems? We see that, and in fact in the Web Summit we will show the example of Luizão, which is a player who joined Benfica 15 years ago, and he just retired 1 month ago, and is the best example of a player who says, without technology I could never be the player I was recently. So technology helped a lot the players to develop themselves, not only at technical level, but also in terms of human performance. What we try to do today with technology is to get more information and to try to develop predictive models that allow us to know when a player will be at his highest level in terms of human performance, or eventually if he's at risk in terms of injuries or something like that. And really it made the difference in the last 10 years. I'm really looking forward to that bit. Domingos, thanks so much. Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you.